I come today to build on the leadership of John Conyers and all the soldiers that have been on the battlefield since 1989. Delighted to say that from the moment I came to the United States Congress, shortly thereafter, I began to co-sponsor with Brother Congressman Chairman Conyers H.R. 40, the Commission to Study Slavery and Develop Reparation Proposals. You can't see it in its entirety because it's on white congressional paper, but all of these names are the largest number of co-sponsors ever in the history of this bill. 216, 217, and I believe growing. These are people who have committed from all parts of America, all political persuasions under the Democratic caucus, from moderates to conservatives, to progressives and others, have decided that this is the time for H.R. 40. Then who are we to say we will wait? That is why we can't wait. And we're certainly grateful to people like Erica Alexander, who worked so hard to encourage the effort that we were engaged in. John Conyers, we have mentioned, and his family, all of them were part of this. I'm delighted that the Congressional Black Caucus, now led by Congresswoman Beatty, all in and have listed this as their priority. The leadership, Nancy Pelosi and Steny Hoyer, Jim Clyburn, Hakeem Jeffries, and Catherine Clark, and all of the whips, as I am a chief deputy whip, have been kind enough to be co-sponsors of this legislation, along with the Democratic Policy and Steering Committee and the Honorable Barbara Lee, who you will hear from. Momentous leadership. All of those leaders of the Democratic Policy and Steering Committee, which I sit on, are supportive of this legislation. And so, along with this letter that has evidenced 350 organizations of every faith, every social and political and civic and civil rights organization have put their name on this letter. Yeah, I like show and tell because I'm presenting it to the court, and the court are the people of the United States, all of you who are listening. So let me thank Color of Change, dynamically jumped in and reached audiences that we could not reach, as did the Human Rights Watch, reached audiences that we had not yet reached. The ACLU stood steadfastly on the Constitution and reminded us that the progressive movement and the understanding of the laws of this land would not let us wait on H.R. 40. Certainly the Centers for American Progress are elements who recognize the change. And then, of course, though I cannot name all, it is important to acknowledge our outstanding persons that you will hear, but I must mention Dr. Julianne Malvo, along with the NAACP, the National Urban League, the National Action Network, and the National Coalition for Black Civic Participation, and I've already mentioned for you the Congressional Black Caucus. So what is my message today? It is similarly that Juneteenth, as I wrote the legislation, became the first member of Congress to introduce legislation to establish a federal holiday after, for a decade, introducing a congressional resolution, and finally achieved that last year as it was signed one day before Juneteenth. I always thought that Juneteenth should be a day of both somberness and sacredness, because my spirit behind H.R. 40 and joining Congressman Conyers and having him hand this baton to me, how honored I am, was that slavery deserves its honor, because for 246 years, human beings not judged as human beings by this Constitution were born into slavery, lived and were burdened by that, separated and snatched from the very origins of family, for some of us created by God, but put asunder by the structure of government to snatch babies, 6-year-olds, 11-year-olds, 17-year-olds, husband and wife, as they called each other. They had no last names. They were first named by anything that the master could name them. They died in slavery, and their progeny were again born in slavery, and that was their life. Have we as Americans ever stopped to reconcile that life for 246 years? Have we ever reconciled that the underpinnings of the economic engine of America was developed by those who received no compensation, no insurance, no life insurance, no salary, no ability to have an egg nest, no ability to build that little home? We remember the story of America when it was told to those who were on the East Coast in the founding colonies, go west, young man or young woman. And they went, yes, and developed massive ownership of land. They built the little red schoolhouse, the general store, and a church. We never had that opportunity. The descendants of slaves, when freed after 1865 in its totality, General Sherman said 40 acres in a mule. But the politics of government, the new president, Johnson, came and imploded that and said they will get nothing. But yet, we made cotton king. We built the economic engine. We created the Wall Street banks. We created the commodity in Chicago. And we created and contributed to the transatlantic slave trade when the explorers said, spices and oils, let me put them aside. The wealth of getting human beings will make me wealthier than I could ever imagine. And they created wealth on the side of this new foundling nation. And then in Europe, they created a mountain of wealth. We continue to build the United States Capitol that this little Black girl walks in every day in complete awe. But I stand on the soil and the infrastructure that was built by slaves. The White House that every president has sat in and slept in was built by slaves. Washington, D.C. came up around their labor. And when it was hard work, as someone told me, when they wanted to build the very top of the Capitol, they used slaves because they were expendable when they fell to their death. And they kept sending them until they could build that very pinnacle of the United States Capitol. And so I believe it is crucial that we view this as an emotional moment, that we cannot wait. And we want the Congress and the White House to join us in raising their voices and getting this done now. And we're not angry such that we are in such a moment that we can't see clearly. We can. And just quickly, as I raise these points, so that you can know that we're standing on foundation of truth. First of all, let me say that I stand on 101 years of Tulsa. We were there for the 100th. I stand on the powerful existence of Leslie Benningfield Randall, now 107 years old. Viola Fletcher, a survivor of Tulsa, both of them 108 years old. I stand on the life of Hugh Van Ellis, World War II veteran, 101 years old. He was a baby. And I heard these words from him, that he was at war in Tulsa and no one bothered to give him a GI Bill then. And he was at war in World War II. And do you realize that there were Black soldiers that did not get the GI Bill? Because if your state viewed you as second class, you did not get it. But what else did you not get? I take the Constitution. Are you fully a recipient of the First Amendment? Or have those of us in this skin been denied free speech, been rounded up after the terrible killing of George Floyd and the commentary of our friends that they should be rounded up, they shouldn't be allowed to be protested. In this Capitol, there were hundreds arrested. Did we get the First Amendment? Did we get, in fact, the Fourth Amendment of the unreasonable search and seizure? Did Breonna Taylor have the right to not have an unreasonable search and seizure coming into her home under the auspices of government without permission? Did we get due process, or was property taken away from us under the Fifth Amendment and the 14th Amendment? Have we had a trial by our peers? Or is there tradition and history? Did Emmett Till get a trial? Did the three little boys in Mississippi get a trial? Did those in the Black Panther movement get a trial? There were many in the civil rights movement that saw no trial. And so this moment today is a reflection, let me be very clear, of the government's actions. This is not to seek any response to this from individuals other than individual Americans, other than their acknowledgement that slavery was wrong. And it was one of the original sins. But the government, even through the Bill of Rights, the 13th Amendment, they had to admit on the floor that their argument to eliminate slavery was not about the equality of the slaves. They had to convince the men in that chamber, we are not arguing about the equality of the slaves. They're not equal. But the law demands that we have slavery no more. 14th Amendment, as I said, on due process and the right to vote on the 15th Amendment, have we been completely made whole? No, because we need the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, because in the 21st century and the 20th century, we've been denied the right to vote. We are not free. Let me give you these final points to ensure that the urgency is here and that the 4 million who were enslaved and the descendants thereof, and the fact that in my state, General Granger had to come in 1865, which is the basis of Juneteenth, to free those of us who had not yet been freed. But let me quickly give you this point. It is evident that there is a wealth gap. You will hear 17,000 to 171,000. It is evident that if we had had reparations, it is evident through the Harvard study that we would not have suffered COVID, the African-American population, as deadly as they had suffered. It is evident that education is unequal for our communities. And it is evident that there are stars in our community, successful people. That should not be used as evidence that HR 40, the Commission to Study Slavery and to develop reparation proposals, is not crucially needed at this moment. The inequities are stark in health, education, and wealth, in housing and redlining. We have the facts. In the court of law and the court of equity, I can show you the data that has characterized African Americans in 2022. Then as we look to the fears now permeating through our community, in spite of every African American who has gone into the United States military, who are teachers, who are business persons, who are contributing to the economy, who are patriots who love this country, who stand with the flag, who love the Constitution, who pray for the sanctity and safety of this nation. African Americans do that every single day. We embrace our Hispanic brothers and Asian American brothers, our Anglo brothers. We embrace them all. We embrace all religions. We are loving people. And all we ask is that the nation accepts us for who we are and pointedly addresses what has been left and thrown to the side while we fight and work and give every day. And so as I close, let me remind you that as the people of Mother Emanuel were praying, Charleston, South Carolina, and they opened that door to a young white man. Their lovingness said, "Come in and pray with us." They did not know and did not judge him that he had been filled with the hatred of wanting to start a race war. Not their fault. They were praying, descendants of enslaved Africans. They suffered hatred and racism, but they were loving. And then, of course, in Buffalo, New York, person who had been filled with the evilness of the replacement theory came and killed 10 African Americans. The most recent buried the last dynamic, beautiful person on last Saturday. Uvalde, hatred, children dead. We as African Americans embrace and love and reject that and mourn and cry for that loss. And so we ask simply that you give us a simple thing, and that those of you who are joining us in this rally, in this town hall meeting, let us do it with the spirit and the spirituality of our ancestors, and speak loudly that we can't wait for a day of justice and reparations. And I believe by Juneteenth, we will have that response that the nation and the world will see, and they will applaud it. As my colleague, the Honorable Barbara Lee, has joined me in, the world will say, "Ha, America is the nation that we should follow." They look back to heal and to fix, and they understood HR 40, the commission to develop reparations. Its time is now. God bless you all. Ashe.